Swimming like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Welcome back to another episode of the Shrimp Tank. We come to you virtually from Seattle and the entire great PNW, the Pacific Northwest. If you want to learn how to start, grow, or run a successful business, you have come to the right place. This is the podcast for you. This is where we say street smarts and book smarts collide. Hello again, everyone. I'm Dan Whedon, and my co-host today is Craig Swanson, gone for the month of February, but now back again, and we're all very happy about that. We'll talk to him in a minute. Our guest today is Vanessa Laughlin from Bannister Advisors. Through founding Bannister Advisors, Vanessa's passion for client services has met the opportunity to ease the complex emotional and logistical burdens that individuals and families confront in the face of critical circumstances across their lifespan. She holds an MBA with distinction from the Foster School of Business at Go Dogs, the University of Washington, and a BA in economics from Tufts University. I don't know what their mascot is. We may find out. She was honored in 2019 by the Puget Sound Business Journal as a 40 under 40 finalist. Vanessa, welcome. We'll be with you in just a minute. Everyone, you can find us wherever you get our podcasts: iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher. For Craig, Overcast, and YouTube. We are ubiquitous. We come to you from about a dozen other cities, including the mothership in Atlanta, Boston, Boca Raton, whole bunch of other places. We like ours the best, but don't tell anybody. Now, listen, before we bring on Vanessa, Craig, hello there.
Hello, Dan. It is great to be back. It's great to see you.
Well, you know,
a long time.
It has been a long time, but I'm really excited to tell you something. The last time we saw each other, you had invited guest Daniel Marinello from the Seattle Golf Fitness. Daniel and I we've had a quick bromance. We've become fast friends. He had invited me out to his fitness studio to get an assessment. Do you remember that? My golf fitness assessment?
I do. You were so excited.
I was excited. I thought, I'm 58, but I'm in pretty good shape. I think I'm going to do well. Craig, can you say epic failure?
I can.
Epic
failure.
Look, there was 16 tests. I flunked all of them until the last one. Apparently, I've got great forearms, but that's it. Everything else is no good. It was humbling, to say the least. Daniel stuck around the whole time. And I think he was eating popcorn and enjoying the show of my failure. But you know what came out of it in all actuality, Craig, and I want to share this and get a little bit of a feedback from you before we go to Vanessa. In reality, golf mirrors life, because the things that I was weak in golf are issues potentially in life. We're talking about shoulder mobility, hip and pelvis mobility, core, quads, the glutes. Remember, we're firing off glutes. All of those things that, as we all get older, we need to watch out for those things. So this was a very, even though I failed, I have some room for improvement. I'm going to retest again.
That is great. I mean, we are exactly where we were before we got tested, with a lot more awareness, and awareness is huge.
That's right. Well, Craig, you've invited again, and I'm so grateful. I've had fun getting to know Vanessa a little bit before we started the podcast. Vanessa Laughlin, first of all, welcome to our show. As I mentioned some of these life things, in reading your bio and in going through your website, it feels like you help people navigate through some of the things that are outside of their control. And I'm talking about heavy things, everything from health issues, bereavement, mental health issues, crises, all of those types of things that it sounds like you and your team are there to help people get through it, to point them out, to navigate them. I hope I read your website well. Am I spot on?
Bullseye. You're right there. Yep, absolutely. A little shorthand we use is at Bannister, we don't shy away from the hard stuff.
Well, I'm interested, and we're going to learn a lot more about your business, but I'm interested in how you found your way to founding this business, because you are the founder. It's a woman-owned business. Tell us how you got to where you are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Proud to be woman owned. We're also in the process of getting that diverse supplier certification, also disability owned 100%, and also Hispanic owned, Latino owned.
Muy
Business as well.
bueno. ¿Podemos hablar en español?
Podemos hablar en español como quieras.
Well, I think Craig's out. No, we got to bring Craig back in. I think, sorry.
I'm out. I'll let you guys go. You
I
go.
Da igual. But if you're más cómodo así, Craig, we can definitely continue in English. I think
appreciate that. Thank
we're
you.
flexible. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way. This is actually a great example of one of the things that we always have to do at Bannister, which is meet people where they're at, right? So this is a good example. We had an opportunity to model that. Maybe Spanish is fun or comfortable, but let's converse in English. Why don't we?
Fantastic. Well, I actually am really curious because basically you described all the things you do, but you're also this kind of unique employer benefit option. So what you are describing you do is basically something that larger companies or companies basically deliver through you to their employees. It's something that I've never really heard of other companies doing. Like, what type of companies hire you and why?
Yeah, such a great question. And I want to go back briefly to Dan, your original question is sort of how did we get here? And honestly, again, the short answer is life. I would say, like a lot of folks in my 30s, which I have now said goodbye to that wonderful decade, hit me a bit like, choose your metaphor, freight train, anvil from the sky, tsunami, T-boned, whatever you want to say. It's a lot to happen for folks who are, building their careers, starting families, starting to get the early sense of responsibilities for those in their life who maybe are older and need their support. So it was really grown out of my own personal life experiences and the role that I was playing for the people in my family and my community, and even to some degree myself. And that's really where that insight came from originally.
For me, I even have a hard time just kind of picturing like what, maybe just a story of like an example of how a company would bring you in,
Yep.
Obviously all private, but how do they bring you in? How do they have you help their employees in unique circumstances?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the single biggest driver in whether we engage, and usually engage fairly quickly with an organization that reaches out to us. And when I say organization, we're talking everything from private sector, public sector, nonprofits, large foundations, membership groups, right? So when we say organization, we mean that rather broadly. But we're getting a call typically from a manager, a senior leader, definitely someone in HR capacity is very much who's picking up the phone, sending us an email, getting in touch via our website or through LinkedIn. And what they're saying is, hey, I'm here trying to look out for my employees, my team members, and I don't know what to do. This is outside of my scope in every way possible, but I do know that I want to be part of the solution. And so they're there often, right? It's oftentimes the employer who's going to know when and why someone's taking bereavement leave, or why they're taking a medical leave from their role, why they're needing to take time off work or have a more flexible schedule for a caregiving responsibility for anyone in their life. And so it's interesting, it's definitely over generations, we've found a heightened level of duty and I think responsibility that employers see themselves fulfilling. And even if they don't think that they, should be doing that, what they're finding is that the types of companies that do provide those holistic benefits and really understand how they can be part of showing up for their team members when they're going through whatever life's going to throw at them, what they're finding is that those are the types of organizations that not only attract talent, but even in these most critical moments, retain. We don't have great data on it yet, but we know heavily from the anecdotal, the stories that we get directly from the clients we work with, the employees at these companies, these organizations, that we're helping people not only be more productive while they're at work, but we're also helping them stay in role. Sometimes people are forced to leave not only jobs, but careers because of their circumstances, what's going on in their lives. And again, I know we're going to get into a little more of those details in those stories, but broadly speaking, these types of circumstances, crises, etc., are have a huge impact on our ability to show up and to contribute and to sustain and continue as well.
So, Vanessa, I'm actually a little surprised for me that this is such a genius thing. I don't know that I've heard of, I've run into anybody yet that I know that's been using that type of services. So I guess maybe a two-part question. Number one is, what's the ideal size range? I'm guessing it's number of employees. You probably have a kind of a sweet spot of a size company that's going to use you. And then the second question is, do companies retain you on an ongoing basis? So, or can they one-off, hey, we've got a situation, we want to hire you. So can you talk about those two a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have two basic models when it comes to what we broadly call our benefactors. The benefactor is that third-party payer for whoever their employee or constituent or member, community member, et cetera, might be. We tend to have standing contracts with program fees associated. For companies, our sweet spot in that 200 to 10,000 range. If it goes above 10,000, we're growing as quickly as we can. We're excited to continue to scale, but we're just frankly not there yet to be able to serve some of the, 50,000 plus organizations,
right,
let's say. However, of course, we're doing work for clients who are part of these organizations. Sometimes these clients are paying us directly, privately, or they are getting our fees are covered by their company, or sometimes even teams in large tech companies we've seen will pool together resources to cover something when, say, there's a pediatric oncology situation, or an early multiple sclerosis diagnosis, or a bereavement situation, right? Grief and loss support. So whatever those look like, we're definitely in that more program approach with, again, that 200 to 10,000, but really we're working with a huge range, and compensation can come in different ways. I'll also add that it can sometimes start as we get a call and it's a crisis response, and it's can you jump right in and help? And yeah, we can do that. And what ends up happening later is then maybe a few weeks or a month later, they say, can we get ahead of this? Can you come on board and be part of our employee benefits package? Because, these are the things that you never think are going to happen. But when they do, actually having, that benefit already established in place, having folks know who they can call, how to be in touch. And I will add, those relationships are really important, between our team, our leaders on our team, the individual navigators on our team, and the HR leaders, the managers, the people who are sometimes that first call on behalf of someone else.
Yeah, I think I'm just in my head as you're talking, thinking of the great peace of mind that must bring everybody in the organization, just knowing that you're there. Well, everybody needs to have the peace of mind and knowledge that we have wonderful sponsors, and we're going to take our first commercial break to hear from our spotlight sponsor. And when we come back with our guest, Vanessa Laughlin, for our hot or not section of the show, we're going to find out if she thinks birthday parties at roller barns are hot or not. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank. EO Accelerator is a coaching program for Seattle area business owners who want to grow their existing small businesses beyond $1 million in annual revenue. As a small business owner, you face new challenges every day, whether it's deciding how you're going to fill a rush of new orders, puzzling out where to find new customers, or sweating about making payroll. Do you find yourself wishing you had an instruction manual for your business? At EO Accelerator, our mission is to empower entrepreneurs with the tools, accountability, and community to aggressively grow and master their business. This is more than just theory. This is entrepreneurs helping entrepreneurs. with top Seattle business leaders who have been where you are, volunteering as coaches and mentors in the Accelerator program. Because the hustle will only get you so far. The next level of success is a team sport. Want to hit $1 million in revenue? Join the club. Now back to the show.
Dan, I love hearing you read that. All right, folks, welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and thought leaders from the Puget Sound area. I'm Craig Swanson, and our guest today is Vanessa Laughlin from Bannister Advisors for our next segment, Hot or Not.
So everybody's probably, Vanessa, knowing this is going to be a bit of an inside joke, although we'll do it in English, Craig, not in Spanish, but it's a little bit of an inside joke, but we're going to have some fun with it anyway. Hot or Not, Vanessa, is where Craig and I pepper you with questions about business, about life, about a whole bunch of things. You're going to tell us whether it's hot or not, and then why or why not. So you know what I'm going to ask you. Roller barn birthday parties, hot or not?
Hot.
So I got to tell everybody
Piping hot.
Okay. So funny enough, Vanessa, I might be more lukewarm, but tell us why you said it's hot.
So we're gonna do a brief bit of time travel. So if you were to go back in time, specifically back in time and into the heart of Puget Sound, you will find yourself on the north end of Whidbey Island. Delighted to find out that Dan was holding down the north end in Oak Harbor. I was holding down the south end in Clinton, Washington, unincorporated Island County at that. And I was making my way up to Oak Harbor's roller barn for birthday parties in the 80s and 90s. And if you think, what is that? Is that like a roller skating rink in a barn? You're correct. It is. And I think that, not totally sure if they survived the pandemic or not, but I will say a lot of wonderful memories from different events at that location. And again, these are just the kind of fun little trivia things you learn about the Northwest in particular, and all of our, I'll just say, interesting island cultures.
Yeah, Craig, just before you ask your question, when I found out she was from Whidbey Island, when I was reading her bio, I reached out to Vanessa. I couldn't wait. I had to find out if it was Oak Harbor, if it was those other people down at the south end. But since she came up and spent their money at the roller barn in Oak Harbor, then it all worked out. So Craig, take it away.
I feel like you two could just have your own podcast. This is great. This is kind of like a rural skate king from what I'm like picking up here. All right, so Vanessa, hot or not? I'm gonna go. This is just something I picked up from like some background stuff. Ecstatic dance, am I saying that right? Ecstatic dance. Oh,
interesting. I'm very familiar with dance. I'm not sure if I'm super familiar with ecstatic dance.
No, I got this from one of your friends. Okay, so let's just hot or not dance.
Hot. Mm-hmm. Dancing, movement, joy, again, like I said at the beginning, when you work in a profession and alongside a team day in and day out, dealing with the hard stuff, there's two important things to keep in mind. Joy, dark humor, right? And part of joy is finding it in your own ways. And I am definitely a huge fan of dance. I don't have a dance background, so later in life, anyone I think can pick it up and can pick the kind that works for them. But even tonight, I am very excited to join about 80 close friends for the big dance class that we do located in the north end of Seattle. And it's a really good time, and it's a really good way to stay healthy, stay joyful, and frankly, play in a way that you don't really get to in most day in, day out experiences.
So Vanessa, and I think since you work with employees of your clients a lot, I'm curious what your thoughts on are hot or not, hybrid or virtual work?
Oh gosh. Well, let me put it this way. I think that we've actually always done hybrid work, even when we all worked out of our homes, let's say as farmers or smiths, or we're going kind of way back. So the idea that we ever truly had a clear divide between our work selves and our personal selves, I mean, that's science fiction. That's that show Severance on Apple TV, right? It's not actually reality. I know back when I was in consulting, there would be occasions where I would have some of my best ideas driving to work before even meeting with the client at the client side or wherever that might be. And so I think, again, the idea that we have to constrain it to hybrid or remote, I think we have to feel a bit more broadly. And I would also say, working with employees, if you're going through, again, some of the tough stuff that life throws at you, healthcare related to your kids, yourself, your spouse, mental health, getting through, grief and loss, working with complex family dynamics, the list goes on. If you're, again, spending time in traffic, let's say, to commute, or having to worry about getting ready for, the workday, or not having the flexibility that hybrid provides, I would say that you're going to, as an organization, limit the kind of people that are going to be able to work for you if you limit it to a severe degree their ability to have hybrid options.
Cool. All right. Well, this next one's going to be a bit of a gimme, but hot or not, women-owned businesses.
Again, I think everything is hot, right? One thing that I think is interesting is to see some of the numbers, and I of course don't have them ready to share at the top of my head, but just what we've all seen, again, both anecdotally and from the data, about the growth and expansion of women-owned businesses, not even just over the last few decades, but even through and maybe because of the pandemic. So I think that much like hybrid work it's here to stay. Right. And I love being part of different communities in Seattle and beyond that really focus on supporting female founders, non-binary founders, and everyone who might not be what we think of when we think of, come to mind what an entrepreneur looks like. I think just expanding that vision and seeing that become a reality is very hot right now, continuing to trend.
So, Vanessa, one kind of getting away from hot or not, one of the situations that you've brought up several times is family dynamics and dealing with issues. And one of the things that especially I think people in my age group, because I have a few years on you, start getting into is parents aging, dealing with moving them sometimes into assisted living or memory care, death, following death, and then some of the, real family dynamics that often happen with siblings and all of that. We've been through it with my parents. We've been through it with my wife's parents. I think for a lot of employees, they're dealing with that, but they don't even know, unless there's somebody like you saying that they can get help from their employer. They can get very lonely. You feel like you're dealing with this alone. How do you make sure that employees know that whether it's this or something else, that it's okay to be vulnerable and say, I need help?
I will say that my answer to this question maybe would have been different 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago. The pandemic, does that sound familiar? Does that ring a bell? Okay. Some people have started to kind of put it back into the way back archives, but it really level set, I think, a lot of people's understanding of what going through a hard situation might look like. Believe it or not, before the pandemic, even if I had, or you had, or Craig had gone through something challenging in their life, whatever that might be unique to them, there were people who said, gosh, yeah, no, I've never had anything, there's never been any kind of like life crisis or, personal issue or anything that's been really overwhelming. It's just kind of been, steady state. We can all now describe a shared experience, again, different for everyone. But again, I don't think that's, how do I put this? It's a bit of a one-way street. We can't go back from what we've experienced collectively. So that being said, here's the reality. Some companies, some leaders are going to have worked hard to create environments where people feel comfortable sharing when they've reached their limit, when they're, let's say, not able to arrive to work on time, not able to deliver, they're not sleeping at night, their own health from the levels of stress and anxiety that's being caused is leading to situations of burnout when they might otherwise be able to handle everything that, let's just say their work world is throwing at them. I think that the important thing is to, be realistic, especially in the climate that we're in with layoffs. And so I think, understanding that even if it isn't about being able to have conversations about what you're dealing with at the highest levels of organization, if there aren't forums for that, you're always going to hopefully be able to find support and camaraderie and ultimately accommodations from your manager, from your colleagues. We've noticed an uptick in people that we work with joining and engaging with the employee resource groups. We used to call them affinity groups that are now built for caregivers. And, sometimes we find ourselves helping inform our employee clients that, did you know that there's a Microsoft Working Families group? Did you know that Amazon has a group for, women in tech, who are also caregivers? Did you know about, what's going on Airbnb? They've got 19 ERGs, maybe one's for you, right? So the list goes on. But I think just trying to, at an appropriate level, in an appropriate way, continue to bring up that conversation within your company. And frankly, ask. That would be my number one takeaway. Bring it up in a way that you can happily have your leadership take action to support you.
That's great. When Dan was just kind of referencing, the experience that we go in with different age groups, whether it's parents or the sandwich generation with parents and kids at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It occurred to me how much of these types of issues are not necessarily with the employee themselves, but with the employee's extended family or their relationships.
Yeah.
And I was just going to ask you, how often are you called in to support extended family as opposed to just employee themselves?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I mean, how do I put this? It's really hard to separate out the impact to the employee from what their spouse is going through, what their child is going through, what their sibling or parent or uncle or cousin. It really gets down to that relationship and the role. What we find is a lot of people that are working in really impressive careers and are leaders in organizations and are contributors, they're also leaders and playing important roles within their own families, right? We kind of use the metaphor, we use a lot of metaphors, but one of the metaphors we use is when the record stops, right? Screen, who does everybody look at? And often the individuals that we're working with at these companies, they're that person. So we often sometimes use the word, we're lifespan navigators, our navigation team, but that person's the family navigator. And what's tricky for them is that, yes, they're juggling all the different plates of personal and professional, et cetera, but they're also juggling different roles. Dan, you gave an example of the transition to being kind of in a more caregiver role with parents who maybe up until then, they were the ones you looked up to and said, gosh, if I need something, I'm going to call my mom or dad and they're going to help me out. Now the reverse is happening, right? So in the tougher examples of that, Dan, I hope you're not having to deal with this quite yet. I'll use one very specific example. When it's time for mom or dad to stop driving.
We did that 10 years. My dad's been gone 11 years, 12 years. So we had that 13 years ago. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm sure listen to your body, Dan. Do you kind of tense up when I use that story? I mean, we all do. I will say that is one of the hardest. Think of all the joy that we get, when we're teenagers, when we're 16 and pass our driver's test and we get our license and get those keys, hopefully. The taking that away, so much grief, so much loss. And if you're dealing with an underlying situation, circumstances like dementia symptoms or an actual diagnosis, let's say of Alzheimer's, you're only adding to that burden. And so the reality is when someone is playing that family navigator role, that dual role that they're playing is both the fixer of the problem and facilitator of finding solutions, and also the son, the daughter, the sibling, the spouse. It's too much. And even if someone in a normal capacity could do these things, again, another kind of metaphor joke we use is, can a dentist perform their own root canal? Maybe. Should they? No. Find another dentist to do that. Right. And I say that because we do work with physicians. We do work with social workers and psychotherapists and clinicians who say, this is the time for me to actually not show up in that capacity that I do day in and day out in my actual job. It's my time to just show up as me. as Dan, as Craig, as Vanessa.
Well, I'm going to tell you, Vanessa, I'm going to call you a superhero here pretty soon, because what you really do, and like I said, this was kind of new to me. What you guys do is heroic, and I applaud you. I also have to applaud our corporate sponsors. We're going to take our second short break to hear from those sponsors, and when we come back with our guest Vanessa Laughlin for our Plead the Fifth section of the show, I'm going to ask Vanessa to be a little vulnerable herself. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank. And Plead the Fifth is brought to you by our corporate sponsors. Thank you to Ideal Life. I didn't say that very well. Sorry about that. Thank you to Ideal Life 360, Cornerstone Financial, First Underwriters Insurance, BC Fitness Studio, and Upstart Group. Please visit our website at www.shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle to learn more about these terrific companies. Now back to the show.
All right, and welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and the brightest CEOs from the Greater Puget Sound area. And we are having a great conversation with Vanessa Laughlin. And Vanessa, we'd like to welcome you to a segment we call Plead the Fifth.
And Vanessa, this is where Craig and I are still going to pepper you with questions, but we're turning up the heat a little bit, as you'll hear. You can plead the fifth, but you can only do it once. So be careful. I know Craig knows you pretty well. So if you plead the fifth early, it could get a little bit ugly here. So we'll see how that goes.
Great. Do I get any kind of special prize or like
I was going to say that at the end you win
the fifth at all?
Yeah, no, at the end you win absolutely nothing. However, we hope you have some fun with it. So yes. So I'll start off and we'll see. I talked about vulnerability because you mentioned that people, help them be vulnerable. So we're gonna turn the tables, Vanessa. We all know, and especially as entrepreneurs, that we can struggle with things ourselves in our entrepreneurial, managerial leadership role, even in life. It said we can be our own worst critics. Share something with us, or plead the fifth. Share with us something that you struggle with.
Oh gosh, how much time do we have? I'm just gonna pick one.
Okay.
Something that I struggle with, and to be fair, this will sound like a backhanded compliment, like when you say, "What's your greatest weakness?" Like, I work too hard, right? I don't mean it like that, but I will say one of the ththings I struggle with as an entrepreneur is not feeling like I have to do all of the things, right? Particularly when you start a business where you are the MVP, the minimum viable product, and then you quickly grow and scale, right?
Yeah.
And sort of replace, I say, I'm the sort of like, wood carved version of the very first iteration. And now we're into like carbon fiber, machine printing, much, much more credentialed and qualified people playing the role of lifespan navigator. But I was the earliest iteration. But when you grow up in a company in that way, it's really hard to resist the temptation to be in every room, be part of every decision, to really, have the faith that the really critical foundations, the sort of DNA of the company that really was your original vision and really your original, blood, sweat, and tears, et cetera, all of that investment that you made, it's this interesting moment where you really have to say, you know what? I don't need to be part of that decision. You know what? Maybe I want to tinker and fix that broken process, but somebody else is not only going to do it, they might do it differently and they might do it better. That's actually the good news. So I think that my evolution and experience as an entrepreneur, and this is, I'll say, my third business. The first two were sole proprietorships. And so this has really been an evolution and a graduation for me, I would say, into a different version. But I would say, hopefully my colleagues would agree that I'm getting better at it. The letting go, the beyond the delegation, but the really trusting other people to bring the vision collectively into the future and not just relying on one sole founder to continue to do so.
All right, I've got a plead the fifth question, and this comes a little backstory. So my sister was a firefighter and then an EMT. I've had friends who were nurses, and at some point we had to introduce rules about subjects they couldn't lapse into at the dinner table because they like their own sense of what's appropriate and not appropriate has been kind of warped. So where's your warped sense of conversation that we'd have to like keep you from talking about at the dinner table, given what you get exposed to at work all the time?
Oh gosh, again, we could go on and on. I will pick I will pick one, which is, drum roll please, the big one, death. Death, dead, dying, died. These are all words that make a lot of people cringe. And I can imagine the people via the live stream or the people listening afterward, they're going to feel uncomfortable. We use euphemisms like passed on and I lost that person, etc. And reality is, when you're in those active, initial, early days and the throes of grief and loss, that's really just, it lives in your body. There is no way to escape it. The reality is, you don't mind when people use words like dead and death and dying, because it's accurate and it's real. And the euphemisms can kind of piss you off. They can kind of drag you down and they can make you feel very isolated. And so one of the privileges that I have in doing this work with my team, and again, our team, they come from a range of clinical backgrounds, generally speaking. Predominantly, it's licensed independent clinical social workers who are also have or are currently practicing as psychotherapists. But we have palliative care experts, hospice social workers, people who worked in pediatric oncology, people who worked in specifically transplant oncology, emergency medicine. Again, the list goes on and on. Our website has all the wonderful bios of our team members and our community collaborators. But what I want to, pull it together with is this. All of us, because of our backgrounds, the lives we've lived, and our roles at Bannister, serving our clients, again, in their hardest and their darkest days, it keeps us very, how do I put this, aware of and very, if not comfortable, then what's the right word? Used to, accustomed to, right? It never gets easy, right? This doesn't mean that we don't have feelings. This job makes us cry regularly. I mean, I think at the point where it isn't making you cry occasionally, you have to check in with yourself if you're doing okay. Because it's a good sign that you're still the full human you need to be if this work affects you the way it does. But what I want to say is that other people are not necessarily going to be in that same space. Maybe it's a place they used to live and they don't really want to visit again. And I mean that by having old grief that doesn't want to be brought up. But I think I try to do a pretty good job of reading the room and getting some of those micro expressions, because what I will say is that having the ability to have real conversations about what's really going on lets you stay vulnerable, but it also lets you connect to people, maybe even people you've never met before, so much more quickly and so much more meaningfully. And I don't know about you, but definitely one of my post-pandemic traits and preferences is I can't do small talk anymore. I just can't.
So I'm going to break away from Plead the Fifth because I think we have a PSA that we want to bring up here. And it's something I want to make sure you talk about, because May is coming up. And in addition to Mother's Day and all the other fun things that May flowers, hopefully, May has a special month. And you and I, or we all talked about this pre-podcast. Can you share what May is about?
Yeah, so May, as some of you guys might know, is Mental Health Month. May is the month of the year in particular that Bannister gets to kind of almost in a bit of a roadshow style, take the most interesting content, things that we've learned, best practices, and we've put together some really exciting, really innovative, and really, frankly, valuable programming in relation to Mental Health Month. And we're specifically bringing it to the organizations that we might have, some early conversations with or early relationships with. Maybe we've done one or two support engagements for them, but we're really bringing some of our, I would say, greatest hits from the past year and the past years to organizations in a live and interactive format. And so that can be live on site if it's in Seattle or California, where we have team members based. It can also be done virtually via Zoom. And it's psychoeducation, it's validation, it's normalization, it's all the things that people are afraid to ask in a certain context. And we create these platforms and these forums to do so. So we have a very clear perspective on what we think would be helpful for organizations. And then within that, we can customize the content based on audience. So we're bringing this to our organizations of all sizes. And we're also bringing it for the biggest companies. We're right now scheduling with their employee resource groups, some of those caregiver groups, family focus groups, et cetera, that disability focus groups that I mentioned earlier. So thank you for asking. I appreciate that.
That's great. All right. So I got one last question, and then I think we're going to go to wrap up. And it's just looking back over your life. You've lived a lot of things. You're an entrepreneur. What advice, if you had a chance, would you go back and give your 18-year-old self, of that person looking ahead to not knowing what you know now?
I love these series of 1-minute answer questions that really could go on for hours, days, weeks. Gosh, what would I say to 18-year-old Vanessa? You know, I think I'll close with this. I think that I would encourage or invite her to consider, because much like Vanessa now, Vanessa at 18 had very strong opinions, was independent streak, let's say maybe a little disobedient, a little issues with authority. So I would humbly suggest that she consider finding out ways earlier in her life to seek meaning, to seek out professions, to seek out relationships, to seek out communities that really fed that part of her. One thing we didn't get to talk about that I'll again mention briefly is that of all the things that happened in my 30s that were really hard, losing my father-in-law, Jay Bannister Laughlin, to cancer when he had just turned 65 was devastating for me, for my husband. It was his father. It was also devastating for my 3.5-year-old who lost effectively another parent. And the sadness of my, at the time, 13-week-old infant who had just been born to never get to know him. For me, being able to build Bannister is much more than just a business. It's a way for me to make sense and make meaning out of this incredibly difficult experience of loss, and then the continued grief of not having Jay in our life. So the fact that I get to say his name every single day, Bannister was his middle name, is fulfilling in a way that I don't know if I could have even described it accurately to my 18-year-old self, but I certainly would have encouraged her to seek it even sooner.
Oh, wow. That's really powerful. All right, Vanessa, thank you for joining us today, for being a guest on the Shrimp Tank. For listeners that want to get in touch with you or learn more about what you provide, or how companies could potentially provide what you provide to their employees, how do they get in touch with you? Where do they go?
Absolutely. The two places I would encourage people to check out would, one, be our website. Easy to find. It's our name.com, bannisteradvisors.com. And I know that information will be shared afterward as well. And then secondly, our LinkedIn page. You know, we're not really newsletter people. We know that it fills up people's emails. So to kind of keep up with the latest news and information we're sharing, things we're celebrating, like, hey, it's March, it's Happy Social Worker Month, for example, right? These different resources, things like that, connections, community, and frankly, vulnerability, and maybe a little connection as well. Please, check out our LinkedIn page, follow that. And that's a really, really great way to stay in touch. And again, reaching out to us directly, again, via website is also a really great place to start.
All right, fantastic. All right, and for all of you watching, you can check out the replays for this show and all previous shows at the shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle. And get us wherever you get your podcast: Apple, Google, Spotify. I love Overcast, Stitcher, SoundCloud. You pick whatever it is. Follow us on there, and please follow our show and social media pages on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Well, Vanessa, muchas gracias. It was wonderful to meet you. I love the stories. That was very powerful. That almost made me cry, Craig. I don't think I've ever cried on the Shrimp Tank, but I was close there. That was very powerful. Thank you for being on, and thank you for all that you and your team do. Craig, I hope it won't be 2 months again. It won't be. You'll be back again in April. Thanks again very much for being here. Everybody else, do exactly what Craig said. Go to our Facebook page, like us. That's where we live stream every Wednesday at noon. Our next show will be on Wednesday, March. Oh, let's see. Is that right? No, we are in March. Oh, no. See, I'm all messed up, Craig. I got all sideways. It's not next. I say
We're-
next month.
It's
How about
March
this?
1st and you add
Wednesday,
7.
March 8th. Linda Popke is going to be with me, and we'll join you then. In the meantime, please be safe, be well, and be prosperous, because until next week, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp